The everyday person would take their Frisbee and grab their friends to play a simple game of pass. But the more educated person would grab their friends and play their local disc golf course. What makes disc golf so different, you might ask? And to that, I would say that it expands on the concept of throwing a Frisbee to a basket instead of to your friend. Now, you might be wondering, why have I never heard of this sport in my life? Yet you've seen those disc golf baskets or the tee pad somewhere when you were walking in the park. Although disc golf sounds like your everyday sport, I would describe it more as your crazy uncle who has been playing all of these weird yet interesting sports, and then he introduces you to disc golf and invites you to play around, and you're really intrigued by the sport. Disc golf has been around for much longer than you think. Even though there is no clear origin on where the sport was born, the earliest account of disc golf was in Bladeworth, Saskatchewan, Canada in 1927, where 4 elementary kids threw tin lids into a circle that they drew onto the pavement. As they got older, they eventually graduated from elementary school, and the sport was later forgotten. In 1965, George Sappenfield, a recreation counselor who was on his break from Fresno University, was playing a casual round of golf by himself when he thought about using Frisbees instead of using a traditional ball and club for the children on the playground. The kids ended up really liking this game. A couple of years later, in 1966, George Sappenfield found out that his instructor had been promoting disc golf to the children a couple of years earlier. In the end, they both became great friends and suggested a lot of cool ideas for the game. George went back to college until he graduated in 1968, where he decided to come back as the Parks and Recreation Supervisor for Thousand Oaks, California in the Parks and Recreation Department. He then decided to try and get Whammo's attention for a disc golf tournament. George put in a lot of effort that Whammo actually offered him a position as the promotions consultant. The first thing that he did with the company was to try and get Steady Ed Headrick's attention to put a Frisbee golf event in the all-comers Frisbee meet that Whammo was planning. And in 1969, George Sappenfield made the first disc golf tournament. Now, he ended up using Whammo's hula hoops as the disc golf catchers, but instead of placing them on the ground, he had them hanging up as he believed it would be more interesting to watch the discs fly through the hula hoops to complete a hole. And also, an employee of Whammo was also there. His name is Irving, and after watching the disc golf tournament, he was very intrigued by it and he wanted to show his boss Ed Headrick. Sappenfield ended up working with Whammo until they were sold in 1982 to the Chronicle group. And for Whammo, they never mentioned disc golf in a 7-year span. Although nobody was promoting disc golf at Whammo, the sport was still very much alive and thriving. A small group of people, including Jim Palmery and his brother, had been playing the sport competitively since the 1970s, in which they all played tournaments and they all played league play. The group of them were becoming so big that they decided to pitch it to the city of Rochester's championships, and they ended up liking the sport so much that they made it the main event. And when this group figured out that disc golf was a bigger culture through the IFA newsletter and Steady Ed, they decided to make a national championship in 1974 to figure out how many people played disc golf. And during this championship, they put a Datsun DB10 on the line for the winner. Dan Stork ended up winning the tournament, which got Ed Headrick's attention to make a sports promotion department and hired Dan Stork, the winner, to be the new director of the department. Disc golf was growing rapidly at the time, as the 1975 championships were a big success, so Ed decided to include disc golf in Whammo's upcoming 1975 World Frisbee Championships, which ended up being very successful as a lot of people participated in it. Also, Ed decided to create the first permanent disc golf course in Oak Grove Park, Pasadena, Los Angeles County, California, which used poles to mark the end of a hole. In 1976, Ed decided to quit his job, although he had mortgages and debt to pay, to go full-time into disc golf. At the time, he didn't really know what to do to make money from the sport until he had a bright idea. With this idea in mind, he decided to make the Disc Golf Association in 1976. On the flip side, one of the first moves that Dan did was to incorporate disc golf as a national tour of qualifying events for the big World Frisbee Championship that Whammo had been sponsoring for a bit of time now. This move from Dan helped disc golf grow nationally and even helped Ed sell courses around the country. Ed's next big move was to start to sell memberships for $10, which in today's money would be $45. This ended up being a power play as everyone around the country wanted one. After selling memberships for a bit, Ed decided he wanted to make something bigger, so he decided to make the $50,000 disc golf tournament. Players all across the country signed up for it. The process did end up taking a bit of time, but Tom Kennedy ended up winning the tournament. Ed at the time was also managing the PDGA all by himself. A lot of players did not like the fact that it was just him managing the PDGA. So, a group of players created an organization to challenge the PDGA. Ed, who was very annoyed and angry, sent them a letter stating that he would use his clout to stop their organization. This move from Ed really upset a lot of the players. The first time that Ed really needed somebody to help was to help him plan out the next year's disc golf tour, which would take place in 1983. So, he searched for volunteers. Ted Smethers. Now Ted decided to help Ed by marking out the places that they would be going on a map. The both of them had the plan all finished in the winter of the same year. The tour also ended up serving to be the qualifying rounds for the second Disc Golf World Championships to be held in Huntsville, Alabama. And of course the tour was an amazing hit for all of the players. In 1983, Innova was born. At Innova, they would be constantly researching on how to get a disc to fly further. One day, Dave Dunapis created a disc called the Eagle, which was heavier in weight and smaller in size. And to explain the difference between on what is different from a Frisbee to a disc, I'm gonna have Outside Me do just that. Now with these two discs, the main difference is the edge of it, which creates a very vast difference. As this one can travel not as far, but it can spend more time in midair because of that bigger ridge can catch more air within it. But then that also creates another problem, which is it's more affected by the wind while the disc golf disc doesn't. And to quickly explain this concept, I'm going to quickly throw these Frisbees for you guys. Let's go, ultimate one. This one. That's a great way to explain the concept. Back to you, Duke. The Eagle changed how people threw discs, mostly because it was different from every other Frisbee. So everyone got it. On the other hand, Ed hated this new disc and he did not want people using this disc whatsoever, even in tournaments. But the tournament directors actually ended up fighting back, saying that people should use whatever disc that they like and whatever disc that they want. So, that was the first time that anyone has actually convinced Ed to do something else. So, during the next Disc Golf Championship, Ed decided to hand over the PDGA to a group of players led by Ted Smethers. This move from Ed gave a lot more power and control to the players. And Ed also decided that he still wanted to be a part of the PDGA, so they all came together and made multiple drafts of a constitution. The next year, in 1985, the group decided that it would be the best to set up a steering committee. This group would consist of Ted Smethers, Ed Headrick, Lavon Wolf, Patty Knuckle, Rory Culbertson. Disc golf at the time had no system to track the players' rank. Now, this system was made by Chuck Kennedy in 1998, who got this idea from Bald Golf's handicapping system. Chuck still wanted something different from the handicapping system, so he said, quote unquote, "My thought was that our members might be better served with a system that promoted fair and competitive divisions without having to adjust the scores like a traditional handicapping system," said Chuck. That was the basis driving my thoughts. Twisting a handicapping system into a rating system that could help fix this problem, end quote. Chuck ended up flying to Toronto, Canada to talk about the concept that he wanted to explain to Brian Hoinger, who was the PDGA administrator. Brian ended up really liking this idea for the system, so he paired him up with the computer nerd Roger Smith, and in 1998 it finally released. Now, it did take a while for all clubs to adapt this new system until Commissioner Pat Goving forced all tournaments and events to use them. And finally, in 2003, the rating system was used everywhere. This is where one story dies, but another starts anew. Ed Headrick died on August 12, 2002. That is where one player changed the whole entire game. His name is Paul McBeth. And in the early 2000s, he started to play disc golf, and in 2006, at 17 years old, he played his first professional tournament and won. Paul really had a knack for disc golf, so he kept on playing. He played tournaments around his area, and in 2008, he made disc golf his professional career. And in the span of the same year, Paul played in 29 professional events and got $11,852.50 in winnings. And he ended up earning the PDGA Male Rookie of the Year award. Paul kept on winning a lot of tournaments, including the 2012, 2013, 2014, and the 2015 World Tournaments, and then he won again in 2019 and 2022. When people ask me, what would you say is a shot that changed the history of disc golf for the better? I would have to say it was the shot thrown by James Conrad when he was trailing behind Paul McBeth by one stroke. This was truly something else for the sport, and the best way to describe it is from both Paul McBeth and James Conrad.
It felt like a pretty magical moment. I was lining it up, I knew what I had to do.
And I knew there was a chance that James could throw this shot in, but it was one of those moments in sports where it's like 99.9% chance this person wins, 0.01% chance that this person can tie or win.
Everyone knew that I had to make it to have a chance, and it felt like everyone wanted me to make it. And
I'm in that moment. James throws a shot in and I could feel it. Like I can feel the roars going through my body.
It's still unbelievable to me that it went in, but just the coolest feeling ever.
This was truly a historical moment for the sport, as it drove even more people to the sport as it was covered all over the media. To me, the whole researching and writing process came very hard to me, as I'd never really put too much effort. But my English class that I am taking this year made me truly realize the power of planning out a movie with a script and a storyboard. With this project, I really had to switch out my whole entire YouTube schedule and my streaming schedule to accommodate for writing the script and making the storyboard for this video essay. In contrast, it had drained out all of my energy, but my mental drive kept me going through it, which led me to finish the script in a week to meet the deadline for filming this project. I had to go through a lot of material on the internet, with a lot of it having false or completely wrong information, but I did find quite a few articles that were either factually correct or from a trusted source. So of course, one of them came from the PDGA website, where I went in full depth of the history of disc golf, which was super helpful because then I could fact check other articles that I was reading, as most of them were not factually correct in any way. So without all of those articles, this project would have never been completed. I will end up leaving those sources at the end cards. I also watched some disc golf documentaries on the history of the players and the overall history of the sport. So I decided to watch the Holy Shot, which went over the general history of the sport and then leads into the amazing shot that James Conrad made, which inspired that segment. I then decided to watch a documentary on Paul McBeth, which inspired me to write a segment on Paul McBeth with his amazing backstory. Overall, this project has taught me the importance of the history of disc golf and how it influenced the game to grow as it is today. And without Ed Headrick, disc golf would not have been where it is today. My one favorite reason why you should play disc golf is this one quote from Ed Headrick himself.
What I think is that disc golf has offered this tremendous multitude of wandering souls that would like to learn to do something on their own without somebody barking at them what the rules are or telling them how they have to do the game. And disc golf is just that game. You can go into a public park, take your own Frisbee, play at your own time, run if you want to, do anything you want, participate in a sport to any degree you want, and nobody tells you anything.
Boy, I hope no one's home. It's far. Got the disc. If it did before, not. If it did. Let's go. Oh, it did.